Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Autodesk Virtual Academy. I'm Nigel Mbayak, application engineer here at Kativ, and welcome to our weekly learning program all about Autodesk software for the manufacturing and engineering space. So as you can read here on the screen today, we're going to be going over Inventor drawings and documentation. So I figured, let's go ahead and jump back into the basics because, having a strong foundation in your modeling is, the way that we can all, get better at what we're doing and just make sure that we're delivering the right content to our to the consumers. We've got Rich Sanchez here, who's our Kativ Inventor instructor. I'm sure those of you here on the webcast who might have taken our Inventor class might recognize him for either taking his class or on some previous AVAs here. So thanks again for being back, Rich, and we're in for a good one.
Definitely.
So for those of you who haven't been here, welcome. If this is your first time, and those who have been here multiple times, welcome back. So if you do have any questions at any time, feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar chat panel, and we'll be able to answer those at any time during the webcast or at the end during our dedicated Q&A session. Also, if you do have anything else in regards to questions that might not be related to this webcast, you can always email questions@kativ.com, and we'll make sure that we get the right people addressing that for you. So expect to be here for the next 30 to 40 minutes or so. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and pass it to Rich. Anything I have to add there?
No, I think you covered it all. We're going to get back to basics, cover maybe some features that people don't know about or just don't know how they work. And I'm sure everyone's happy to have you back from your few-week absence here.
Yeah, it's true. I have been away for a while, but it is glad to be back here on AVA. So let's go ahead and jump to it.
All right, let's get to it. Okay, so as Nigel mentioned, I'm Rich Sanchez. I'm one of the certified inventor instructors here at Kativ. And what we're going to go over today is really heavy on inventor drawings. So inventor drawings, that's the documentation stage of our design process. Our models are great, our 3D models, parts, and assemblies. They are very valuable to us, and they really help in not only the manufacturer, but the concept and designing. But that's when we get to the end of the process, the documentation is our deliverable, right? And it's really about communication. So getting everything into a good, solid drawing allows us to communicate with the fabrication department, how these things are made, allows us to communicate with the sales department and consequently our customers of this is what you can expect your product or your part to look like. Many times this is how it's going to be assembled, as we can see in the example up on the screen. I mean, the documentation is key. So everything from dimensions of the product to a parts list or bill of materials for the assembly, all the way up to in the top right corner of that image there, you can see actually how this assembly comes together. So for the most part, I've found, not only through training, but also in support here at Kativ, that everyone has more or less the same standard workflow, right? Everyone will open a drawing, and whether you're working in an Inventor IDW or an Inventor DWG, it's generally going to be the same thing. But you'll place a base view, maybe some projected views, add some dimensions here and there where needed, some basic ballooning, a parts list, and then manually filling out your title block. So there's nothing wrong with that. As you can see here, we have a perfectly viable drawing that has all of the information that some customer or some fab team might need to build this or understand how it works. But maybe we're missing out on some features. Maybe there's some other tools in the drawn environment that you've either seen and don't know how they work or don't even realize that they're there. So that's what we're going to look at today. So let's go through kind of the topics that we're going to cover, and then we'll go ahead and actually do it. So to start with, we're going to look at some of our expanded drawing features. Slicing, it's not just for bread. We're going to go ahead and slice our inventor views. So your drawing views on the page, we'll look how slicing those can give you kind of a different perspective. Crop views. Crop view can certainly be useful. So if you have a view on a page, whether there's just too much in it or you want to focus in on a specific component, you can certainly use the crop tool to do that. Breakout view, if you're trying to see the internals inside of an assembly or inside of a part, a breakout view is very useful for that. It lets you just kind of cut away a layer or a certain depth of your component so you can see what's going on behind that. Okay, and then just continuing down the list, hole detail. So this may not necessarily be so much of a drawing feature. Certainly hole details in drawing is a feature, but what I want to cover here is the differences in holes and how holes are created. So you'll see in our example there, two holes very similar, however the notation on them is very different. So we're going to discuss how that happens and perhaps the best practice for placing your holes on your parts and therefore in your drawings afterwards. Custom balloons. So balloons can be a very powerful tool if you know how to use them. I know when I was in industry, all I really did was use the balloons to number my components, and those numbers related to the items on the parts list. It was great. It certainly served its purpose. But with a little bit of work, we can customize those balloons and get a lot more useful information. So in our example here, we can see that we're using the balloon tool to not only call out the part number of the component right in our drawing view, but also the quantity of that component that's included in the assembly. So we'll look and customize our balloons a bit. And then getting down now to the end of the list, but certainly not the least important features, we're going to look at editing your parts list. So a parts list, of course, is our bill of materials. It has all of the information in it for the assembly, how many components, the number of each component, description, part numbers, great information. We're going to take a look and see how we can add information to this and also maybe filter this out to get specific information that we might want. So I know this is definitely a tool that's overlooked quite a bit. And then, of course, we're going to wrap up with iProperties and title blocks. So I know that when I was using Inventor in industry, I filled out my title blocks manually for the most part, but there's no reason to do that. So we're going to look at how we can link the fields in our title block and really any field in a drawing to an iProperty, so that way it will be automatically populated as you are creating your drawing. So I know we've covered a pretty decent list here. We're going to jump right into Inventor now and hopefully try to chip away at that. I know that we're trying to keep you close to the half hour, 40 minutes here. So if I move a little quick, go ahead and speak up, let me know, and we can slow it down a bit. Otherwise, we're just going to try to cruise through all of the different features we want to cover. So bear with me a second while I switch over to Inventor. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start by working our way down that list, and we're going to go into our slice view. So I just have this pre-configured drawing here that has a page for every different feature we're going to look at. So we can see on our drawing, I have a nice side view of this particular component. Happens to be part of a turbo. Well, the slice view is up here on our ribbon, and it's a tool that honestly I never really thought about using. To try to create that zero depth section of my product. But when you really think about it, that could be very useful if you're trying to take a look at internals or how internals might interact or connect and actually get that on a drawing. It's easy enough to see when we're in our model environment because we can use our interference tools and see what that looks like. So slice view actually requires two views and a sketch. We're going to work through this right now. So I have my base sketch here. This is initially where we're going to work off of. To prepare for the slice view, first I need to create a sketch on my base view here. So to do that, I'm going to first select the view, start a new sketch, and then I'm going to place a line vertically, and it could be really in any direction. But to make this simple, I'm just going to place a vertical line here on front of that turbo snail there. And if you wanted to, you could even dimension this right from the component. So if you had a certain distance you wanted your line to be, Now, if I only wanted one slice or one of these 0 depth sections, I can leave that. But I can also place multiple. Let's say I just create a quick pattern from that one line. Maybe I want 4 at a space of, let's say, 1.25 inches. Perfect. Okay, great. So now I have 2 of the things I need to create our slice view. I have my base view and I have my sketch on that. Now I need to create a secondary view to go ahead and implement the slice. So first I'm going to finish the sketch, get out of sketch mode. And now I'm going to project off of that base view. So activate the projected tool up on the ribbon, select your base view there. And I'm just going to drag this off to the side to get a nice side view here. Right click and create. Great, so now I have my side view. So now I'll go ahead and start the slice command. And it's going to walk me through this. It's going to tell me select the view that I want to slice. So that's going to be the new view that we just created. And now I'm going to select the sketch that I want to use to create the slice. Create OK. And you can see it's sliced right through that. So if I only wanted the 0 depth section, this would be great. But perhaps I wanted to see more or a little bit of how internals interact. So now I can expand upon this by projecting off of our sliced view. So let's say I project that up into the side there, right click, create. And let me just drag this down. Great, so you can see now I have my 4 lines, so I have my 4 slices. So you may find a use for this in your current workflow, you may not, but hopefully now you have a better understanding of how it works. Great, so let's jump up to the next topic, crop view. So this is a very nice isometric view here. Perhaps I only wanted to focus on one component in this, or maybe there's just other things in this view that I don't really want to see. So could I replace the view and maybe find a new part, or perhaps I only wanted to see a specific portion of one of my parts. Crop view works great for that. So I'm going to focus on this lower section of the body here. I'll start the crop command. The first thing I need to do is select the view that I want to crop. So I'll select our only view on the page right now. And I'll simply zoom in. And let's say I go from this bolt hole here. I'm going to click and actually draw the rectangle that I want my cropped view to be. There we go. So let's say that's really just what I want to focus on in my view. I'll click. There we go. So now I've created this nice cropped view. And perhaps I wanted to blow that up to see some detail. I can certainly do that. So I can simply change the scale just as I would any other view. Great. So now we'll see that I can much easier view the text that's embossed on the front face of that casing there. All right, moving on, let's take a look at a breakout view. So you'll see this is the same part that we used for our slice view example, the snail from that turbo. What if I wanted to see inside this, right? Well, let's go ahead, and I'm actually going to project a view off to the side here. And I could work on this view here, but I think it might work a little better with a projected side view. Create. Okay, so now I'm going to focus primarily on this top right section of this part. I'm going to create a sketch there that's going to define the area that I want to cut away. So just remember, to create a breakout, you need a view and a sketch. So I'm going to click on the view that I want to sketch on, and then click the Start Sketch option on the ribbon. And I'm just going to use a standard rectangle. It doesn't need to be any specific shape. Could be rectangle, circle. You can draw lines if you wanted to. There we go. So there's just my rectangle. I could define that if I wanted to as well, but I'm just going to leave that kind of there for now. Great. Now that I have a view and a sketch on top of that view, I'm going to go ahead and start the breakout command. So the first thing I need to do is select a view. Now select the profile. You'll see it's actually already selected my sketch. So now I need to give it some input. It's asking me, okay, from where and how deep do you want me to cut into this part? So I'm going to have my depth selector selected and make sure it's depressed there. And you'll see I can pick any edge or any point that I'm looking at. So I'm just going to start from this flange out here. I'll pick an edge on that flange, and I'm going to say from there, I want you to cut 2.5 inches. Okay, great. And now it's cut away right inside of that part. If I wanted to, I could also project off of this part. Create. There we go. And I'm stacking my views on top of each other here, but I just want you to see how even in this isometric projection now, the breakout still exists, and I can see right inside of that part, see what's going on internally there. So especially if you're building assemblies that have internals, breakout view can be very handy to see what's going on the inside. Awesome. All right, let's keep going. We're going to take a look at the whole detail now. All right, so this is pre-set up here. I'm going to zoom in on this very simple part, and I'm going to switch over to the annotation tab on our ribbon in our Inventor drawing view. And we'll see I have my regular dimension tool, so I can certainly dimension that hole with my regular dimension tool. And you'll see I get a dimension that tells me, the diameter of this hole here is 0.42 inch. The diameter of this hole here is 1/2 inch. That's awesome. But what if I wanted more than that? Well, that's why Inventor includes the hole and thread detail tool. So I'm going to click on the hole and thread note tool there. And this time, when I click on the hole on the left side, you're going to see it's much more thorough, right? It's telling me that this is a 1/2 inch 13 UNC 2B threaded hole all the way through, or to a depth of 1 inch rather. Now when I click on the hole on the right side, notice that I can select either the hole or the thread. But if I select just the hole portion, it's only telling me 1/2 inch through. So the reason that's happening is because of the way this was created. I'm going to switch into my model view really quick, and we're going to take a look at the actual part we're working on here. So our top view here, now it's in the same orientation as it is in our drawing. The hole on the left here was created using the hole tool. So I had my plain block, and I created a sketch on it. I just placed a point that I positioned, and then I used the hole tool. Wrong option there. I used the hole tool there to go ahead and place that hole and make it a threaded hole. Versus the hole on the right side, that I actually just sketched a circle on top of our block, and then I extrude cut it out, and then I came back as a secondary operation later and threaded the hole. So generally what I found is when you do that, when you extrude cut a hole, that you're not going to get all of the same options or features from the feature and thread note tool as you will if you actually use the hole tool to place your holes. So that just could be more of a best practice type of thing. I always recommend using the hole tool to place your holes, because when we get to this documentation stage, you will have a lot more options here as far as the hole moves. Great. Okay, moving on down the list, I think we're making a decent time here. Let's take a look at our custom ballooning. So I've just preset this view. This is the same view that was in the sample in our PowerPoint. Now let me go ahead and balloon this the normal way. And it's going to bring up a note here wanting a parts list. No, I've already placed the parts list, so I can just place the balloons. There we go. And we'll see I'm getting my standard balloons. So these are all numbered, and they all correspond to the item number for this assembly in the parts list. And that's great. But what if I wanted to get more information? So let's take a look at how we might do that. The first thing I'm going to do is switch to the Manage tab up on my ribbon. Then I'll open the Styles editor. And in our Styles Editor dialog, I'm going to look for the balloon option there. So we'll see I have my standard balloon ANSI set up in here. I could either change this, which I don't recommend. I always recommend just adding another style. So which is what I'm going to do here. With that selected, I'll click on New. And it's going to ask me, well, what do you want to name this new style? And for now, I can just call this Custom Balloon. Great. So we can look at our options here. So all of these things we can configure: leader style, text style, offset, the balloon shape. So I'm actually going to choose an option that doesn't have a circle on it. So one of our options down at the bottom. And then we'll see the property to display. So by default, it shows item, and that's why it maps to the item number, and we get that nice little number in the bubble. Well, if I click on the property chooser, you'll see that I have access to basically any property of that part or component that I can bring through in a balloon. So let me scroll down and look at the part number. I'll select that, click on Add to bring it over to the right side there. And then I'm going to click on the item option and remove it. The last thing I want to do is reorganize these. So I want my part number first. I'll select part number and then click on Move Up. And now this is the information that my balloon tool is going to return. It's going to give me first the part number and then the quantity. Click on OK. Save that really quick. Save and close one more time. And now I'll go ahead and place some more balloons. This time I'll place our new balloons along the top side here. And don't worry, I know they're still showing up as little round circles with numbers in them. We're going to fix that in just a minute. Great, so now I've placed these new balloons. Let me go ahead and select them. And I'm just holding down Control on my keyboard and then clicking on each of the balloons. And ensure that you're on your Annotate tab on your Inventor ribbon, and get all the way down to the far right side. You're going to see the Format options. Because I've selected balloons, it's already giving me balloon options. I'm going to click on the lower drop down, and we'll see I have by standard. So the standard that we're using in our drawing calls for the balloon ANSI style. But we'll also see the new custom balloon style that we just created. So if I click on that, it will apply to the balloons I had selected. And you can see that that's now bringing through that information, the part number and the quantity of that part in our assembly. So see this insert, there's 6 of them. So even though I've only ballooned 1, it's going to give me a 6 there. So I've definitely seen a lot of use for this with my customers, either in cases like this where they just want to call out the part number, and maybe the quantity. I've also seen it be very useful for customers that have parts that have a cut length, where they can denote that right on the drawing, right in the view as well.
Yep, and pretty much any property you can pull from that list, pretty much. You can even add stuff to that list if you wanted to.
Correct. If you had custom properties that existed in your iProperties for your parts or your assemblies, you can bring those through and attach them to your balloons as well. So imagine something like a stock number, for example. You could bring that through in your balloons. Okay, let's take a look at our parts lists. Great. So here is an assembly. This is kind of the rest of that whole assembly, right? So we'll see our turbo in here, the exhaust, the intake. Let me go ahead and place the parts list for this. So on the Annotate tab, I will select Parts List off of the ribbon, select the view, and click OK. Now I'll simply place it. I'm going to place it just at the top of our screen here, and then I'll zoom in on it so we can see what's going on. Great. So I'm going to point out a couple of things that I noticed right off of the bat. Our item numbers here aren't consecutive, right? They're out of order. And maybe there's some more information that I want other than part number or description. So to interact with this parts list, all I have to do is move my mouse over it until it glows red, and then I can double click. Let me drag this over. There we go. So simple thing. First is the item number. If your item numbers are out of order like this, if they don't make sense, it's as simple as selecting the item column, click it with the downward arrow, and in our buttons up at the top of our dialog box, we're going to look for this button here. It's got a 1, a 3, and a downward arrow on it. That's the renumber items button. So if you click on that, you'll see it renumbers all of your items consecutively. So that's just more of an aesthetics thing. I think it makes more sense if the item numbers on your parts list are consecutive like that, as opposed to kind of all over the place. We'll also take a look at this really quick. Not something I recommend you do on a regular basis, but many people don't realize that you can override the values in this dialog. So let's say this part number here, maybe for this one customer, for this one job, we need to add some other identifier at the end of that part number. I can simply add that in here.
Or maybe even a vendor. I've seen that sometimes too. That's a big one.
Definitely. Sometimes you want to add that in parentheses or something at the end of your part number, a vendor. But you can override that right here in your parts list. It's very important. I want to make sure everybody understands. Whatever you put here does not report back to the part or assembly file. It will not update the iProperties. But if you're just trying to get some different information on your drawing really quick, you can simply do that here. Mm-hmm. Let me also point out that this field that we've edited is now showing up in bold and blue as opposed to the standard black text of everything else. That's going to indicate to me that somebody has modified this. So if you're coming into a drawing that somebody else has created and you look in the parts list, you see these bold blue fields, someone came in here and manually overrid the default values. To get back to default, you can simply right click on that value and go down to static value at the bottom of the menu, and you'll see it brings back the default static value.
Mm-hmm. And while we're on this, Rich, can you force a return on that field if you wanted it to show up as 2 lines? Say, for example, you wanted that part number to show up as 2 lines. Could you force a return in there?
Well, I can certainly expand the size of the box. So that way it will take up 2 lines. So you can resize all of your rows or your columns here, definitely.
Right. I need to check. It's one of the questions that came through, which is why I'm mentioning it. I'd need to check for sure whether or not you can force a return to have that show up as 2 lines. Say, for example, your part number is super long, and you just wanted it to format in 2 lines. I'd need to look at that for sure. I haven't actually tried that.
Yeah, I'd have to double check to see if you can force it. But I know that a simple workaround for that would be we could manually make all of our rows a consistent size that would appear to force a return.
Right.
All right, so let's say we wanted more information than what this is giving us. I'm going to find the column chooser button in our dialog. So that's up in the top far left. And you'll see, just like with our balloons, we have all of these properties available to us. So these tie back to the individual parts or assemblies, whatever they may be. And let's say, for example, I needed to know item quantity. Well, that's already in there. How about material? I'm going to add material to our list here. And I'll simply click OK. And let me resize this dialog box. And we can see that for the items that the material exists in the part, it's now automatically populating in our dialog box. So this isn't limited to just material. I make this recommendation to all of my students. You can bring stuff in like material, or what's more important, you can bring in things like cost or weight. Weight is a very big one, because then you can use that weight right on your drawings to estimate shipping weight, which then helps to estimate shipping costs for your assemblies or your product.
Right. And just to go back on what we were just talking about in regards to return, I was talking about return using iProperties and not just like forcing the return by like manually editing the part number field. So yes, you can hit like enter or control enter, I think, in the part number field or in any field to make it 2 lines. Yeah, someone was asking how to do that via the iProperties, if you were to pull that field from somewhere else without having to jump in here and manually edit that. I'll look into that for sure. And
I would definitely say it's possible, but we'll come up with the best workflow for that.
Yeah, there's probably a way to do it. Just have to manipulate a couple of things.
Great. So as you can see so far, the parts list dialog, there's lots of options. It's very flexible. Let's look at one last thing before we move on from our parts list. And I'm just going to do this really quick because this always bugs me. I like the quantity down at the end. There we go. But just to illustrate that you can move these columns around in whichever order you want.
Yep. And note for those of you who are using things like frame generator, that quantity field is going to be cut length. But if you want to change that to like actual quantity of that part, there are ways to do that. You can remap the properties. And sometimes people use item quantity.
And actually, Nigel, you bring up a great point. I have a lot of customers that use frame generator to develop parts, and what they're after is how many 10-foot pieces of steel do I need? By default, the parts list doesn't tell you that. There's a very simple, very easy workflow that does that. So if that's something that anyone on today's session is interested in, we can put together a short 5-minute video that shows you how to reconfigure your parts list to give you quantity and cut lengths.
Yep, I know that's a big deal for a lot of our frame generator customers for sure.
Right, so the last thing we want to look at as far as our parts list here is the filter settings. So let's say, for example, this isn't a very big one. This assembly only has 13 or so components here. But what if I had hundreds and I was only really worried about the hardware that I needed to purchase? To make sure, let's say, for example, somebody packaging this assembly pulled the right numbers of nuts and bolts. Very common request. Let's see how we can very quickly, very easily get that information and only that information. In the top, the dialog here for the parts list, I'm going to look for the filter settings button. It looks kind of like a funnel on top of an Excel page. And we get our filter dialog. So once you open it, it turns itself on. You can turn that off, of course, or you can turn it on. And then you can define the filter that you want. So there's a few predefines in here. I'm going to go with the purchased items. And you'll see once I select purchased items, I can say purchased items only or no purchased items. So purchased items only, for example, is going to give us just the nuts, bolts, washers, all of the fastening hardware that are noted as purchased equipment in our assembly.
Right, and just so some people understand how this works, how do items become quote unquote purchased in Inventor? What is the setting for that, Rich?
That's a great question. Let me actually show you how to do that as part of our next example. I'll make sure to bring that up. So to come back into the filter, I could always remove that filter and it brings back my entire parts list. You could also stack these filters, so you can have multiple filters running. But you see the options that you have here. Definitely, I recommend experimenting with that, playing with that. Keep in mind, I will show you in just a minute here how an item becomes identified as purchased. So I'm going to click OK, OK. Great. And to move into our next topic, which is populating your title block and doing that more automatically, I'm going to open up a new drawing. Great. So I have my nice new empty drawing here. As we can see, my title block is very empty. Now let's take a look at a part. I'm going to use this part to place the view in my title block and illustrate how we can populate that automatically. What's key here is ensuring that the iProperties for your parts are completed. So on our browser here, in our part, I'm just going to scroll up to the very top, right-click on that, and bring up the iProperties. And really, any of the fields, any of the properties in this dialog, you can bring through into your title block or really anywhere on your drawing sheet. Even if you have custom fields, custom properties. So just the holdover from our last example was how does an item become identified as purchased? We can set that up here in our properties. So once that's set as a purchased item here, then it will come through. And actually, there's also a setting in the bill of materials for that. So if I were to right-click on this and find our bill of materials behavior, let's see here. All right, well, I can bring that up in a minute, but there is a bill of materials behavior setting for that. Let's see. And actually, I can cruise there really quick. Great. So, for example, let me find one of the subcomponents of this assembly. And we'll see that its default BOM structure is set as purchased. So that is also controllable at the part level and the assembly level. I'm going to bring up our bill of materials dialog really quick in this assembly. And we can see that from right here in the Inventor assembly environment, it's showing me which items are showing as purchased and which are showing as normal. Okay, great. So now to get back into our last example, which is populating this title block with information from our iProperties field. Let's take a look at some of the iProperties in this part. So we have something in our title here. There is an author entry, as well as part number. Let's include a stock number. Oh. So that way we can also bring that through as well. Great, so everything else is completed. Let's go ahead now and jump back into the drawing, and we'll bring some of this information into our title block. So if you are using the default Inventor title blocks, which I have here, this is what comes, out of the box when you first install the software. They're actually pre-configured to bring in some of this information, but I know a lot of customers do start over. A lot of users, build their own title blocks from scratch, and you just manually populate that data. So to take a look at what's going to come through in this, we just need to look at the properties of it. So on our browser here on the left side, I'm going to find our ANSI title block there, right-click on that, and bring up the Edit Definition option. And you'll see here that this has the title block pre-sketched. It also has a lot of fields that are either empty, like this QA field here, there's nothing in there, or fields that have some value in these brackets. So when you see this field that has this value in the bracket, that's an indicator to you that that's tied to some property inside the part or assembly. So let's say, for example, I wanted to include the stock number here somewhere. I'm simply going to find a nice area for that. So let's say this QA section, I want to modify that to be my stock number section. So first, I'll switch our label there from QA to stock number. Great. And now I'll add some text here. So I'm going to click on the text tool up on my ribbon, draw a text box in the area where I want this to go. And now in my text dialog, instead of simply typing some information there, I'm going to link this to a property. So on the lower half of the settings for this, you'll see I have this type option. So I can tie this to the properties of the model. And you'll see you have a lot of options here. So this can be tied to properties of the drawing. You can set up for a prompted entry, all sorts of stuff. So right now I'm going to set this to the properties of the model. Choose the property that I want it to be, which is our stock number. And what's really important, don't forget to do this, once you have those items selected, at the right side you're going to have this button here, this add text parameter button. It's an X with a downward arrow. Click on that and that will bring it in. Okay, and there it is. So that's just a quick, simple change we're going to make. I'm going to go ahead and now finish this sketch. Everything else has already been set up for me the way I want it. And it's going to now ask me if I want to save these edits. So if you wanted to modify this, you could. If you wanted to save this as something custom, you could do that as well. So let's say, for example, you had a title block that went that was different for an internal release as your title block for external release. You can have multiple title blocks existing in your same drawing template. So I can just simply call this my Cative title, save. Great, so now you'll see in our browser on the left side under title blocks, I have an ANSI A, an ANSI large, and a Cative title. So to make sure that I have the right title block here, I'm going to first, under my sheet settings, delete that title block. And now under my drawing resources title blocks, find my Cative title, right click on that and simply insert it. Now it's still empty, right? We haven't brought a model into this drawing yet, so that's why it's still empty. Let me go ahead now and place a base view for our part. It doesn't really matter what view we're in, right? And we can see that it's brought in that stock number that we populated. So if we wanted to make sure that any of these other fields got populated, we could simply make sure that they're filled out in the iProperties of that part. So for example, let's switch back to that part really quick and take a look at the iProperties. So we'll see here that company is empty. So I could fill that in with Cative there. And let's say I have my part number, my description, okay. Save. Back in our drawing, I can edit the definition on that title block again. Find that company entry there. So you'll see that this is now tied to the properties of our drawing. If I want this tied to the properties of our model, simply make that change. There we go. Okay. The title here, likewise tied to the properties of our drawing. Again, if I want that tied to the property of my part or assembly, I can update that here. Great. I'll finish my sketch. It's going to ask me if I want to save. I'll say yes to confirm. And now we'll see that's coming through. But definitely it's worth taking the time to get that set up. I would recommend getting that set up at your template level and then go ahead and save that so it automatically pushes out to all of your users. So I know we're a little bit over here. We've covered quite a few topics. I see actually quite a few questions in the queue. So Nigel and I will definitely stick around as long as it takes to chip away at those. If there's any that we can't get to now, we'll certainly get back to you offline and make sure we get your questions answered and any issues resolved.
Certainly, yeah. There's many dozens of questions in here. So we'll try to cover the ones that multiple people have asked. It looks like there are a few that are pretty consistent among a couple of viewers. And anything that's a little more lengthy in regards to the answer maybe requires a phone call or like a team shares or a screen share or something with the user. We're more than happy to do that after the fact. So let's go ahead and jump to that. Sanchez, if you just want to jump to the QA slide real quick.
Yes.
All right, and I'll turn the camera on so you can see our beautifulness, which is only applicable to Sanchez's side of the room here. Yeah, so we do have, somewhere like 40 questions right now. That's a lot of stuff. So we'll cover a couple of these, and we'll see how much we can chip away at this. As it says on the screen there, you can always email questions@kativ.com or call the number below that comes to our office here and kind of request for help or answer any of these questions from the AVA today. You can always ask for myself, Nigel. Rich, he'll be here today as well. So if you have anything further and you think of something later, definitely jot down this email and this phone number, and we're more than happy to answer anything you have.
And just to clarify, it's more than just you and I answering everyone's questions. We do have a full Lifeline support team.
That is true. There are many of us. Yes. All right, so let's go ahead and chip away at this. So one of the first questions that came through was when we were doing the crop. And the question is like, can I do anything besides a quad? So a square or a rectangle in regards to the crop? And I can answer this. You can do things that aren't quads if you really wanted to. There is, I believe it's a sketch that gets made on that cropped view that you can edit to change, what your shape is. So you can always add arcs, you can make circles, you can do whatever you want to your crop view. If you want a rectangle like minus a little bit at the top, you could always do that.
So the workflow for that is you would place the crop, you would have the default rectangle at first, but you'd have to go back into that sketch afterwards to modify the shape of it.
Correct, yeah, and you can edit the sketch as you wish. You have full-blown like sketch tools to do pretty much whatever you want if you really wanted it to look really interesting or specific to what your needs are.
If you wanted jagged edges like an explosion shape, you could do that.
Yeah, you could, or you could put a smiley face in there if you really wanted to. Maybe that's what I would do. And then this question actually came up twice. If you want to answer this real quick, Rich, what's Cool Orange and why is it near and better?
I have the Cool Orange Thread Modeler tool add-in in my Inventor. What that does is if you've used threads in Inventor, you may have noticed that it doesn't actually physically cut the threads into your part. What it does is it applies an image that appears to be threaded. And then, of course, when you get to the documentation stage and you add your thread notes, it has all that information. But it's still kind of a cylinder that doesn't have any threads cut into it. The Cool Orange Thread tool is a really neat little add-in. It's free. It takes that thread note information and actually physically modifies your part. So it cuts those threads into the hole or the bolt or whatever it might be.
Yep, and that just makes your model heavier, so your file size is going to be bigger.
It does.
And it might take longer to load. So definitely don't model your threads if you don't absolutely need to, because it is very cumbersome on systems, especially if you got multiple fasteners in there.
That's true. If you think about the actual physics and the geometry of a thread, the helical cut and all of the faces it creates, it does make your model heavier. And then when you get into to rendering, it makes an amazing render. But again, it makes that process take longer because now, as most rendering tools work in polys, right now you have more polys that it has to process.
Yep. All right, so we got a quick question here. How can I have a quarter cut view like I have in my model? Should I extrude cut to have the quarter or a cut quarter view? So I think that gets taken care of in the breakout.
Correct. So if I'm understanding correctly, when we're in our model environment, you have the quarter section view option. Similar to what I accomplished with the breakout. So you could use the breakout tool to do that. You can draw the sketch of where you want your breakout to be. Basically, I would draw the sketch so that it's cutting away everything you want gone, and then set the depth to go through the entire part. So that way, as it cuts, then you're left with just that quarter section view.
Yep, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. You just sketch it to whatever you want gone, do a through all, and you should be good to go in that regard. Let's see here.
Yeah, there's another workflow that I could think of using the section view tool, but we didn't cover that today, so we can cover that in another session.
Yeah, for sure. And for all of these other things, we do have a large library of videos and blog posts and such and tech tips on our YouTube channel and on our website. So more than welcome to just Google Kativ, and you'll be able to find our YouTube channel. There's a lot of videos on there, as well as our tech tips on our blog. And a lot of these things get addressed in there too. So if you have any questions at any time, you can always start with a Google search and type, Kativ, I need this, and more than likely you'll find something.
Definitely.
Yeah, we're like 80 plus AVAs now, so
yeah,
more than likely, if it's a common thing, you'll be able to find an AVA on it. All right, so there's a lot of questions in regards to when you're doing custom balloons and doing things like setting up custom views, changing things like symbols on balloons. So can you add symbols to balloons in terms of things like degrees?
I'd have to look into a little bit more of how they want to use it, but you can add prefixes and suffixes to what's showing.
Yeah.
So I would say, yes, you should definitely be able to add something like a symbol, like a degree or something like that to your balloons.
It really depends on the flexibility of the Styles Manager. That's pretty much what's driving all of this. So if it's possible with the Styles Manager, you can have it populate pretty much anything in the drawing, because everything in the drawing is getting driven by the Styles Manager. So if you want to add the custom field, if it's not in the Styles Manager, there's probably some back-end ways to add stuff to that and manipulate the style to do all of this stuff. Another note is all of these changes that Rich was doing, things like on the parts list and the title blocks, only apply to that one drawing. If you want it to apply to all of your drawings, you're going to want to make drawing templates. Yes. That's another topic in itself. So if you want to see, some best practices for templates, please let us know. We can push that forward actually pretty soon here if that's something that everyone wants to see. Templates are a huge thing for drawings and parts and assemblies. So
definitely.
This question comes from Greg. Does Inventor have capabilities run FEA or simulate gas or liquid properties after you finish a design, or I guess during the design process even as well? So yes and no.
Correct. Yes and no. It depends on the version of Inventor you're running. If you're running Inventor Professional, which most users are now with the change in how Autodesk is distributing the software, I believe most users have access to Pro. There is some FEA built into it.
Yeah.
If you want to go more in depth and have much more control over the analysis you're running, there's an add-in for Inventor called Nastran InCAD that gives you a lot more flexibility with the type of simulation you can run. The built-in in Inventor Pro is more static, but in Nastran InCAD, you can run a lot more dynamic simulation.
Right. And then in regards to things like fluids, so gases and liquids, that's a completely different software. That's considered CFD. And there is an Autodesk CFD software in which you can do things like that to do your flow analyses and all of that fun stuff. See your little trails, particle trails and stuff.
Correct. And just to clarify, Nastran InCAD does run right inside Inventor with CFD. That is a secondary program. It's an external program, but it integrates very well with Inventor, and you can bring your models right into it.
Right. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions on that and how all of that works, it is sometimes a little complicated in regards to what's included with what. Let us know. We can kind of clarify those things for you. Let's see. When editing the part, this is a general question that showed up like 6 or 7 times in different shapes or forms. When you're editing your parts list, why are you doing it in the parts list instead of the BOM list?
In some cases, you want to do it in the parts list because it just applies to that one drawing and doesn't make a change really at the assembly level. So like I mentioned, with the modifying of the overriding of values, if I just needed to get some special value in that one instance of that parts list, so I could print that drawing out, get it to a customer or a salesperson or somebody, it's a very quick way to do it. If it's a long-term change, something that you want to be documented for sure in the assembly, then definitely I would say let's do that at the assembly level or the BOM interface there. but as well as different things like we were able to filter our parts list and bring out just the nuts and bolts. That's something that you're going to want to do at the drawing level in the parts list dialog there.
Yep. And it looks like there's about half a dozen people who want to see that frame generator video in regards to mapping, I guess, the item quantity.
Well, if you guys want it, we'll build it.
Yeah, and I think it's already built. We just have to send it to you. So I'll make sure. Actually, I know exactly where it is. So expect to see that like probably in the afternoon sometime. I just have to locate it and then edit the video a little bit and cut it to the section that you need. But essentially what it is, and if anyone else wants it, please speak up.
Yeah, you're right. I think I did make that one.
Yeah, it's how to edit your properties and where they're mapped to. So instead of that quantity field is going to pull from somewhere else instead of a cut length for those frame members. And we'll cover one or two more here, and we'll take care of the rest later.
Definitely.
Let's see. Can I watch this again? I've been wanting to do some of this stuff, and I missed a couple minutes of this webcast. So yes, Sanchez, do you know where they're located?
Yes, all of our videos, all of our KETIV AVA sessions are located on our YouTube channel. This video will be up either later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Yep. So you can definitely view it as many times as you want there. And then while you're there, take a look at some of our past sessions and see if there's something there that might apply to your workflow and make your job a little bit easier.
Yep. And then looks like I covered two more questions here. This one came up twice. Can I do a crop and a break in the same view?
Ooh, that you can't do.
Yeah, that comes up a lot in support too. So just to reiterate, you cannot apply a crop and a break, or I guess a slice and a crop. Any of those functions that Rich did on those views, I think I've tried them all to see if I could do two at once, and you can't. So you need to have
you've broken Inventor trying to do that before.
I probably have broken Inventor.
But if that's something that really a lot of you are interested in, my recommendation, and we can even get the ball started. The Inventor idea space is where we put or post those ideas, and Autodesk reads that regularly. So if that's something that enough people are interested in, they will put that in a future release of Inventor. Yep,
that's something that we'll definitely work on. And then last question before we wrap up today. How do I make a drawing which contains only the bill of materials?
Well, there's a pretty easy workaround for that. You can place a view off of the page and then just simply have your bill of materials on the viewable page.
Yep. So you can like throw your assembly view in space somewhere, and then on the actual sheet of paper that you've got in your drawing, put your BOM and work that way. That's the easiest way to do it. And then when you plot or whatever, it'll only have the page section. So,
definitely.
Yep. So I think that's it. But we'll see you all next week, hopefully. If you are willing to join us, we'll be here
coming up next week.
So next week, it's one of two things. There are things getting scheduled right now. I believe next week is custom materials. Yeah, it's custom materials and appearances in Inventor. So if you do have a custom material that you want to put in, or there's something that's not in Inventor that you need to pull in, things like one of the many alloys of steel. I know I get that a lot, and it's got very specific material properties. We'll show you how to import those into Inventor, or not import those. Create that material in Inventor, apply your own appearance to it. I think the example we're using is we're doing adamantium, which for those of you who watch Marvel movies, you'll kind of understand what that is. There might be a Hugh Jackman reference or two in there. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. And for those of you whose questions I did not answer, be prepared for an email. There's a lot this week. So be on the lookout for that in your inbox. If you don't get anything, definitely email us or give us a call at the number or email at your screen. So again, Sanchez, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And for everyone on the webcast, we'll see you next week. So
you won't see me next week.
No, not him. He'll be in the office. But you'll see me next week.
I'll be back on another episode.
Definitely for templates, I'm sure. So with that, I'll see you later. Bye.